Okay, hello everyone. This is Master Victor Neustroev, and today we are going to do our next webinar. Today we are going to talk about a positional sacrifice in the end game. So, well, usually we know that chess players sacrifice pieces or pawns in order to, for example, have some initiative to start the attack. But this time we are going to talk about when we should sacrifice material in the end game, which stage and because of what. Well, let's wait for more people to join. Please also let me know if video and audio quality is good. Okay, everything seems to be fine. However, I want to make sure that everything works. So I started a little earlier just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, I have time to adjust. So that's why the vast majority of participants will join in 5 to 10 minutes. However, I think we are going to start soon. By the way, is there anybody who joins this workshop for the first time? It seems to me that you participate such webinars and workshops before. Uh, so by the way, well, of course, I know what's John's level is. So, guys, what your ratings are and which countries are you from? Can you please remind me? Okay, one more thing I wanted you to remember. So we have a group at Chesslands on chess.com. The group is called Chesslands, and in this group, well, I'm publishing, for example, my latest videos. You can watch them. I'm not publishing the recordings of these webinars, but those of you who registered for the webinar definitely get the link. Definitely get the link to the recording on YouTube. Anyway, so what I wanted you to do, if you guys want to participate in our daily events as well as make sure that you are aware of all the events that I am going to conduct, please join this group. I can copy the link for you. And from time to time, we are doing daily matches. If you like to participate, if you would like to participate, it's great. So, for example, um, this is a match that we are going to play soon in on March the 8th. So please join and participate. So I'll copy the link for you. Fine. Let's now go back to our topic. So probably you noticed that this time I'm doing the webinar from a different location. Why? Well, and where am I? I'm uh, I'm on the Atlantic seaside of Argentina. So it's a summer house that we rented for a few days. I actually wanted to go here in a week or so, and I would cancel our next webinar for because of that. But then I realized that the weather will be terrible next week, so that's why I decided to go as soon as possible, while there are no rains and no thunderstorms, and it's possible to swim in the ocean. Okay, fine. Well, so everything works according to what I see. The sound is good, I'm sure, because I'm using the same microphone. I took some of my equipment with me. Well, let's start. Let's start and let's talk about this position. But before we think of what white should do, actually, you may start thinking what white should do here. Let me tell you something else. So, a pawn sacrifice or an exchange sacrifice in the endgame is actually quite common. And there are different types of sacrifices. Usually, it's a pawn, sometimes, it's exchange. And but rarely these are pieces, minor and major pieces. Well, I mean rooks. The key idea of a sacrifice is to ruin the pawn structure of your opponent, ruin his position entirely, for example, or just improving your pawn structure. But usually it's about the pawn structure. So you are sacrificing the pawn, make the pawn structure bad, and then you're trying to take advantage of it somehow. Well, it can be also an attack of the king. In the end game, we almost never attack the king, but we may attack it occasionally if not with a goal to deliver a checkmate, but with a goal of improving of our pieces. Also, we can sacrifice material in case if we want to promote a pawn. If so, we can sacrifice everything. So, because if we promote a pawn to a queen, we have extra queens. So that's why we can sacrifice even a rook in the end game. Sometimes it does make sense to sacrifice material in order to then exchange the most active enemy pieces, which create the main danger to our position. Also, in order to realize your positional advantage, it does make sense to sacrifice. For example, you sacrifice exchange, and then it's easy for you to coordinate other pieces left. And by sacrificing exchange, let's say you liquidate the most important enemy piece, which was a bishop, at the cost of a rook. But anyway, so we are going to talk about all these things today. I have five examples. Also, sometimes a sacrifice can be caused by a bluff. Well, do you know this word? Or maybe I'm not saying it correctly. So it's this. Yes, thanks. So why so? Just in order to make the position more complicated, especially if he is low on time, and force him to take some no. Well, the end games are usually more simple than middle games, but by doing a sacrifice, we may complicate the position and force him to take complex decisions. Well, there are a lot of sacrifices in the chess history and the end game, so some of them you have to remember. Um, but what I want you to do is to work on. Well, I want you to practice it yourself. So, for example, you see the position, you don't know how to progress, think of a sacrifice. Maybe it will help. Fine, let's start with our first topic. What we are going to talk today. Well, so what do you think? Which of our pieces to sacrifice and what can we achieve with this? So it seems that knight c6 is the first move that comes to everyone's mind. Well, it's a fork. Of course, has they has to change. Yeah, they have to take on b1. We take on b1. Then they save their rook to b7, and then I actually don't know how to progress because we cannot invade the enemy camp. I thought that maybe we can win a pawn by delivering this check, but if the king goes to c7, it's actually fine. But if the king goes to d8, then what? Once we take on a6, then after rook takes rook, it is a discovered attack on our knight. So it fails. And then I don't know how to progress. Probably it does make sense to bring the knight back and just repeat the position, which doesn't work so well for us. What else? Just knight before here. Well, yeah, maybe, but they can save this rook with this. They can save the pawn with their bishop just by moving the rook. What else can we try in this original position? So c5, sacrificing this pawn, but what's the purpose? Now what? We can get the knight back there, but what did we achieve? Maybe we can play knight a6, and now this rook is hanging, so they have to capture, and then we take on c5. But the problem is that after that, our knight is hanging, and once we capture the enemy rook, we lose our knight. Actually, yes, we lose our knight, because after that, there is no rook c1. There is another bishop covering this square. So, what's your opinion? What if I say that here you have to find a move which sacrifices something? Which move would you play and why? So c5 and knight d3. What else? g5. Fine. What else? Okay, let's see. So c5 and then you go there. But, well, well, you sacrifice, but what for? So let's say they take, rook takes, and then king d6, but you can play rook b6. Okay, it does make some sense. So probably they have to play c4. Now knight c5 doesn't look so pleasant because where this knight goes. Okay, g5. G5 in order to open the file and invade the enemy territory. But let's take a look at this position from a different angle. What do we see? We see that there are light squares weakened in the enemy camp. However, this bishop is actually a good bishop. This bishop is defending the weakness on e6. It's also doesn't allow our pieces to invade the territory. Also, our bishop, which looks like a good bishop, is completely blocked with our pawns and can show his effectivity only in case if we open or his position by getting rid of these pawns, d5 or f5. So that's why here white plays f6, sacrificing it and improving and exchanging bishops. So can we not, can they play g6, for example, and prevent us from playing bishop f5? Yes, it's possible, but after h5, then what? They have to take on h5, otherwise they lose on g6. And if they take, then we have bishop f5. So, for example, this take, knight c6 with a temper, take, and after, well, rook h5 looks attractive too, but let's say g takes h5, rook comes to g8, and this is a winning position. Why this is a winning position? Who can tell me? Rook b1, right? Rook b1 check, and after the king moves, you just win this pawn. How? Well, what else they can do? So king a8, you play rook b6, king c7, you still play rook b6. And once you take this pawn, the a pawn becomes a very dangerous pass pawn, much better than the pawn on h6. So if you think that they can try to defend it, no, they cannot. They no longer have a light squared bishop, so just knight b4 and you win it. Okay, fine. So g6 fails. Obviously, that's why they decided to accept this sacrifice with g takes f6, bishop f5, king c7, and then it's exchange and the knight invades the enemy territory. So it's basically the same position, but this time black has extra pawn and the g4 pawn is potentially the object of the attack. So rook b7, I exchange the rooks, check, king comes there, rook a8, and finally knight b4. Almost the same situation, but they are a pawn up on the other side of the board. Well, instead of knight b4, what else could we do in this position? We could try king d3 move in order to invade the enemy territory using the light squares. For example, if h5, then g takes h5, and if they play f5 to stop us, then just knight e7 and we win this pawn. So knight b4, e4 was played. Knight a6 check, king moves, and how to continue here. So our pieces became active. We have a passed pawn, but if we move a knight, we may lose this pawn. What else can we do? Because right now it seems that black with such a pawn structure cannot progress. With our pawns, we are able to stop. With our king we, and our pawns as well, we are able to stop his pawns. So what would you suggest? Well, rook c6 check, and then if king b7. So the knight moves, but the pawn is hanging, so you have to repeat. That's why white plays c5. Why? To create another passed pawn. So d takes, rook c6 check. This time, if king b7, it's knight c5. So we shouldn't calculate it. And then a6 and so on. King goes to d8. But knight c5 anyway, because the pawn becomes poisoned. If rook a5, knight b7, fork, and we win a rook. So king moves, a6. Rook moves to attack there, but a7. So they cannot really do much. Rook a8 back. Rook a6 defending it. What we need is to replace our knight to b6 here. For example, here the game continued with bishop a5 move. Then king e3. Why king e3? Because if you play knight here, they play bishop d4 and control the b6 square as well as attack our pawn. So king e3, prophylaxis, we stop the bishop coming to d4. And finally, yeah, black should resign. So finally, um, here they decided to sacrifice a pawn to have some counterplay. Well, otherwise they just completely lose. Okay, so thanks, Carly, uh, for your comment. So yeah, I'm really glad that you enjoyed my tutorial videos on YouTube. Uh, Fine, because guys, if you don't see these comments, they are from YouTube because I'm doing a stream on YouTube too. So originally we are doing a meeting in Zoom, but some who cannot join this meeting in Zoom can watch it on YouTube or at Chessland's website. Okay, some sunshine. No, actually, no. Just very little, maybe. My face look red because of, um, well, because there is no lighting. That's the reason. And I tried to adjust it. Let me see. Maybe I can do it. No, not because of the color of the shirt. I also tried with a different one. I can try like that, maybe. Yeah, is it better? So I hope so. And I can also change temperature like that. Okay, so it's better. Fine, let's continue. H5 was played, but nobody cares about that. We win a rook if we do knight a4. Why not to just capture? Well, because well, f5 is played. Then we can still continue with knight a4 actually. But the problem is that they can play bishop h2 and bishop g1. And well, we don't take the pawn on e4, and we have only double pawns. So that's why probably we'd better play h6, h7, and h8. So h6 here, bishop h2, h7. Oh, does it fail? Actually, it wins. So bishop g1, king f4. They take on c5. Here we push, they take, and we push again. They have to take our queen too. This is a winning position because of the passed pawns, but it's a little complicated. So it's easier to not take and just continue with knight a4. So bishop h2 anyway, but king e4 and bishop g1 doesn't win a knight. So bishop g1 anyway, otherwise we play knight b6, g takes h5, and we got the same position, but with two passed pawns. So how did they play? They played f5 here, but well, they may not take it. They may play this move. However, nobody cares already. If this move, it's can be d6. Yeah, it can be d6 actually. King e6, rook a7, bishop takes, and h6. And this king cannot stop both pawns together. Same thing with the bishop. So, for example, f5, king d3 to not let bishop d4, and then you promote both pawns. If they take here, it's h7. If they move there, then you move there, and there is no bishop b6. Fine. So f5, king takes. Well, I don't understand why this f5 move was important. They still cannot. We should play h6 here, but first I decided to go like that, and then d6, and it's over. So a completely winning position. Actually, the analysis should be stopped here. This is a completely winning position, and white can do anything he wants. So look at this original position again. We played f6. How did we come up that this sacrifice is a good move? We just don't see any other way to progress on the one hand. For example, knight e6 doesn't allow us to progress. G5 in order to activate, well, I don't know if it's possible because they can defend the G7. Also, once we reach H7 with our rook, can they play bishop H6 and close it? No, let me see this. Actually, they can play this move. And then they distract our rook because the knight moves. Let's say knight c6. Take, 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 take. And then h takes g5 and it's fine. So because of that, we played f6 in order to activate the bishop and liquidate the main defender of the black's position, this bishop, which didn't allow us to win a pawn on a6. So this is how we came up with the conclusion that we should do this sacrifice. So once again, one factor was that we didn't find any way to progress. The second factor was that we realize that the enemy bishop is good and our bishop is restricted. So by exchanging the enemy bishop on c8, we can capture the pawn on a6 much faster. Now let's take a look at this position, which is actually drawing. But if there is a player who wants to play for a win, it's definitely black. Bobby Fischer was playing with black pieces. Why? Because this bishop, this bishop is restricted by the pawns, and by moving the bishop away, um, you can hang these pawns and make them easy objects of the attack. So what do you think? What we should start with? Here we definitely may mm, we don't need to push the pawns for a while, but we have to push them later in order to promote. Well, do we have a chance to progress? Yes, we do. And let's improve our king. So king e5. Their king cannot come closer. So king g6. What's the purpose of king g6? King g6, even if you do that, what's the purpose? Now, king e5, he's closer to the c pawn as well as to the e pawn. C3, not allowing king d4. Fine. Also, I forgot to say that this is a better pawn structure comparing to these two. Why? Because these are connected pawns, and you can, if you, let's say, exchange the bishops, you can make a protected passed pawn, but the enemy pawns both are isolated, and if you exchange bishops, you can capture them with your king without any issues. So g4 or f5, definitely not. It's likely to be a draw. So bishop d7. Well, what does this move do? We are going to attack a4. So bishop c4, attacking this. Well, of course, we don't lose a pawn. Bishop d5. They do not allow us to capture, to attack e4. So what do you think? How you should play here? Bishop f5. Interesting. Bishop f5, so takes, and this is a winning endgame, isn't it? Definitely it is, because you can capture these and they cannot capture your pawn on f6. Actually, I think you can, let's say king g4. Yeah, like that. So if king h5, I take there c4, I can just come closer to the c4 pawn. If, let's say they, king f5, they play c4 right away, then I come to capture this pawn, this. Is it a winning position? Well, it is, but it's hard to win here because even if we do a staircase maneuver, we can bring the king here, but after that, here they can play king e1, and no, it's actually losing king b1, queen b3, and this is where they can play king e1, threatening to promote. Because if we take, it's a stalemate. So that's why here, in order to win, you'd better play this move. Why? Why? Because after that, what do they have to do? They have to play c5, and then you go there. and king c5. So now you are much closer with your king. So g4, king takes, and it does make sense to continue with king d6 here. But let's first, yeah, king d6. So how does it work? If the king goes to the g file in order to promote, then you deliver a check. So for example, king g7, this, check. So they move away, and we bring our king to capture the pawn. If instead they go there, well, then we just, what's the best move? King e6? Yeah, king e6 is the best move. So if the king goes there, you just play queen g6 and take it because of the pin. So that's why after king d6, he has to go to f7, and f7 is actually extra tempo. Still this, and this. We are in time to capture the pawn. So that's why this pawn in game is winning. But they can just play king f3, and g4 doesn't allow you to progress. Why? Because he simply can go there. Because if now you take, it is a draw. He is able to stop your pawn. So king here. If f4, king f1, and then your king is distracted to capture the pawn on c3, but white king will capture the pawn on f4. If again shouldering, then the white king goes back, preventing this pawn from movement. So bishop f5 didn't win, but bishop e8 doesn't win either. This was the move played in the game. Of course, Fischer understands that this is a drawing position if white plays properly, but he wants to create multiple threats in order to win, in order to provoke the white player to make a mistake. And this is where he made a mistake. He could do anything, including this or this move, but he played c4, thinking that with c4 he reinforces his bishop. But c4 allows us to invade the enemy territory and shoulder the enemy king. King g4, bishop g6 to not let him pass. King f3. So they are playing the only moves. King f2, bishop d1. What now? What would you suggest for white in this position? King e1. No, king e1 seems to be losing, so I think in such a case you can just play bishop b3 and win material. King g3. King g3 was played in the game, and after that the black's position is winning. I'm going to show you how. But let's now imagine that we are playing with white pieces, and our task is to save the game. How can we play so? Bishop e6. Bishop e6, you sacrifice the most important pawn in the center. Instead, it does make sense to sacrifice, well, bishop b7, to sacrifice this pawn, king c4 and king a3. With such a strategy, white doesn't allow the black king to go back to the center. The pawns, yes, you can advance them, but while the king is too far, are you sure that you don't lose them? How to play? Let's say g4 fails. So here you can play king f4, king goes to d4, and just bishop c8. So you definitely understand that if it's one pawn blocked with the king, even if there are bishops on the board, it is a draw. So what white needs is just to exchange pawns. And g3 will be never played. Once the king moves, it's possible to play this move, e5, and exchange the e pawn for the f and then retreat. So g3, for example, this, and every time f5 is played, the bishop will be sacrificed. If black wants to exchange bishops, fine. One king can stop the pawn. I mean, the king alone can stop the pawn. So, well, okay, maybe not this. Maybe let's go that way. But then, well, we just don't need to rush. We will keep our bishop here. So here, king d4, not letting them to pass. If they play g4, then the king goes back. Maybe king e5 in this position, but nobody cares because g3 is, well, g3 is possible, but let's say bishop h3. How to progress? This move, okay, fine. Maybe even this move. Bishop g2, okay, how to progress? There will be a pawn exchange, and then this bishop will be sacrificed for the pawn on g3. So actually, by doing bishop b7 and sacrificing the pawn on c4, it was possible to keep the king shouldering the enemy king, and this is how white would save the game. But they played king to g3, and with king g3, they lost. So what do you think? How to continue here? Well, if 5 didn't work, so bishop b3, well, actually, bishop b3 is a critical mistake. If you play so, king g4, then you take there, bishop takes, king takes, and then this. So you lose your pawns. For example, king d4, king f6. If you take, you lose g5. But if you push, they push too, and you promote simultaneously. That's why not this, but bishop e2. How does it work? This time, if c5, you don't have to exchange bishops, you'll just capture with the king, and that's it. This is what happened in the game. Because if, what? King g4 is still not possible. King h3, possible. But then bishop c4. I'm threatening to win the second pawn by exchanging bishops. So this. Now king g4. Fine. King d4. This move. So who can tell me how this is a winning position? Which move? So king c5 fails because they can take on f6 and still promote. But g4, g4 works. So g4, king takes, otherwise we promote. King takes e4, and now we can force the enemy king to lose a position. So king g3, let's say. Here we don't play king d3. If you do so, he goes back to g4 and threatens to go to f5. So king e3 doesn't allow us to progress. f5. Now what? If king g2, it's king e3. But if king f2, it's very important to move our king, not the pawn, because this is how we shoulder the enemy king. Now he has to leave a position and go, for example, to the side, like that. King g3, and now we are ready to advance the pawn. So this move, fine, king f3, and now we can promote our pawn. If, let's say, he plays something like that, then we go further, and then we promote the pawn. So what you should remember, if the pawn goes first and the king can block it, then it is a draw. If the king goes first and can chase the enemy king away, then you can win. Fine. So c5 takes bishop e6. King goes to d4, bishop f5, and after king e3, they simply resign. Why? Because this king is too far from the protection of this pawn. Bishop f3 and bishop takes e4 is a winning plan. No, I can show you. So, and then you promote the G pawn. But there was a possibility to save the game with bishop b7 in this position. So white would save the game if only he sacrificed the pawn on c4. This would allow him to keep the king in the center and prevent the enemy king's activity. Fine, let's continue. This is our next example. So what do you think regarding this position? It's white to move. What white should do in order to play for a win? It seems that they have a very dangerous pawn, and the first that comes to people's mind is d6, obviously. But the problem of d6 is that you have to calculate the line to the very end. For example, knight e4. Well, definitely sacrificing the knight here doesn't make sense. You lost a pawn, and this rook can retreat or can be located on the d file, for example, like that. So d7, check from behind, and the rook controls the queen in square. If, let's say, king d2, then rook e5 and rook d5. For example, this check, then rook takes rook, and black is winning. But maybe after knight e4, you can play d7. What's your opinion regarding this combination? For example, rook c6, and then you promote. Isn't it winning? No, well, there is a discovery check, but which? So, for example, if you play so, I can just move my king. And then sacrifice maybe. But okay, let's say this check. King goes to c3. If you play rook e3, then I escape to c4. Fine. And then to d5. So probably there is a repetition. If you play so, this time king c4 doesn't look so good because there is this move when I'm threatening with knight a5. Yeah, so d8 and knight a5 is checkmate with these two moves. Fine. So yeah, I discovered the attack. So knight c5, this, and it tells me that I have to keep the king here and always receive these checks. So it is a draw, right? But also here, in case if, for example, rook c6 and d8 the queen, black has this move, after which the queen is completely trapped. Look at the position. The queen has no squares. It can move to d7 or d6, but in both cases, there is a discovered attack. Well, d6 is actually attacked by the knight. And if the queen takes, it's knight d6. Same discovered attack, which wins a queen. That's why d7 doesn't work. Maybe we should bring the king first. Or maybe take the rook. And then d6. Then rook e4. And the king stops this pawn, and a black is winning because he can liquidate it with his knight, and then he is 2 pawns up. So d6 fails. Maybe, wait a sec, maybe d6, d6, knight e4, and then king d3. Or king d2. No, king d2 is not. Okay, this knight c5 works. And if rook c5, what do you think black should do? So rook e1, but you are down a piece. So rook g5, rook d5, let's say. So rook f3. Yeah, it's right. It's rook f3, and you have to play king d2, not something like that. If you go there, they at least take and take the bishop, and then they stop the pawn. So the king should go there. And if so, it's fine just to keep checking and draw the game then. So this, for example, fails. Even if you decide to go to c4, then you can even lose. Fine. So d6 is not playable, but how to play? Who can tell me? Can we try bishop f5? Oh, well, yes, but this is a blunder, I think. Yeah, it is a blunder. Okay, rook c5 and push pawns. Well, rook c5. Well, it's actually not the best way to play. The game is drawing, but because white wants to play for a win, mm, white wants to make the position more complicated. And that's why she took on c5. Pawn takes, rook c4, and rook b6. They want to take advantage of the open file. So bishop f5 defending there to threaten to capture this pawn with a rook. But rook b4. What do you think now? Should we take on b4? Should we take on c5 or what? How to play? So take on c5 since it's a pawn. But if you take on c5, they take on a4. Now they have a passed pawn. You have connected pawns, and the d is a passed pawn. But doing this doesn't allow you to progress. Well, it's a blunder, and then rook d4 is also played. So what else? Well, taking there and then bringing the king makes this a protected pass pawn, after which the king is tied down. So at least black has a draw. That's why bring the king right away, but not improve his pawn structure. Fine. Okay, so Zamfir joined us. Today we are talking about positional sacrifices in the endgame. So here, a positional sacrifice was initiated at this moment in order to make the position more complicated and get chances to play for a win. So rook b4, king goes to d3. Checks, rook checks, and well, we don't want to lose, so block. They took, king takes, now c5 is the object of the attack. So king f6, king c4. So white forces are located ideally. However, if black plays properly, it's still a draw. But the problem is that it's hard to play properly here. For example, what do you think? How to play? Well, what can I say about the white pieces? They are protecting each other. So g4 can be played if needed. The king attacks and at the same time can protect this pawn. These pieces are protecting each other. So it looks really good. How should black play? Well, they wanted to activate the rook. Logical, right? D6. So why not to capture the pawn? Because you can capture it later. D6 is better because it stops king e7, for example. There is no way to protect such a pawn. You have your bishop attacking it. So rook b8, king c5, a5. Now what? So d7 looks, king e7 is fine. White doesn't know how to play here. What would you suggest? Moving the king further. Well, it does make sense, I agree, but then rook b4. So if you play this move, they'll check. And actually, so you play king c7, it works. Yeah, actually advancing the king further works too. King c6, and then what they can do, rook b4, let's say, then just king c7, or king c7. So if they deliver a check, king goes there. Now they can take a, oh, well, no, it fails actually. Right, it fails. So I didn't notice it. So rook b4, and now if the king goes to c7, it's a check there. Why such a check is required? If the king goes to the b file, we take there, I mean black takes there, and after d7, king e7 can be played in time. If instead the king goes to the other side, to d8 or to d7, then, well, rook a4, d7, and now there is a rook that can stop it. And let's say king e8 or king c7 in order to promote. Well, king c7, then it's king e7. So let it be king e8, which doesn't allow this king to go to e7 and stop the pawn. Now a4 and d8 doesn't win because this pawn will be promoted. There is even no e5 because of king f5. So e5 if king takes bishop b1, but king takes bishop and the a pawn is promoted. So that's why it fails. And because of that, not only because of that, but mainly because of that, it's g4. Why? To make this bishop protected, as well as use the e pawn in future and not lose the pawn on g3. On a light square, this pawn is protected more. So rook b4 was played. d7, king e7. So it fails. That's why king d5. Now what? They played king g7 in the game. Why? Why cannot they capture on a4, which looks natural? If so, it's e5. And after the king moves, it's d7. What do you think? What if black, for example, tries to play rook e1 in order to stop the pawn by attacking it from behind? By doing a skewer, actually. Rook a1, bishop c2, but then rook a2 fails. Yeah, it seems to work. Because I actually thought that bishop d3. Why? Because if now they play it, rook d1 move, then just king d4, and then they can promote. So I simply blocked this file with a rook. But bishop c2 works too. King d4, well, rook a1, king d4 works too. Because now, if there is a check, you block and then successfully promote. Fine. In the game, it was king g7 played, and that was actually a mistake. Well, So let me show you. So d7, rook b8, and king g6. Then the king goes there, and the pawn is promoted. So for such a pawn, black has to sacrifice a rook. The rook moves to a8, and we promote. So there is no time to play king e7 because the rook is hanging. But instead of doing king g7 move, it still was possible to draw the game here. What do you think? How? By doing rook b8? Let me see. So I don't think rook b8 is a correct move because the rook becomes very passive. So you play e5, king g7, and then you continue with king c6. No, 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 let's do d7 instead. So king f8, king d6. So you do not let this move. But they now move the rook. However, it still should be winning. For example, I can play this. Rook a6 fails because of bishop c6. So the rook has to move to d8. Now if king here, it's king e7. But I can actually defend with the bishop and go after the other pawn. And then try to promote it too. Maybe there is a better way to play. So no, king c6, maybe not, d7, this, this, this. No, it seems to be the best option. Okay, anyway, so no, rook b8 doesn't work, but it was a very nice attempt. It's rook b2. Why rook b2 works better? Well, e5, king g7, chasing the king away, d7, and this time rook d2 can be played. They can try to play, so d7, it's already rook d2, so they can try to play something else, but then king f8 is in time. So this move, then king e7. If this move instead, there is a this. So every time d7 is played, it's king to e7 and I stop the pawn. But they didn't. Okay, so that was an example of how to sacrifice uh, the exchange in order to make the position complicated with chances to play for a win. So bishop e4, let's say just keep the rook there, you play bishop c6, rook d4. If king goes there, then f6. Yeah, because if not f6, then it would be winning. But f6. Why f6? If this I take there and this is a draw. If this I also take there and this is a draw too. Yeah, so the king cannot take the a pawn, so it should be located on c7. That's why it's still a draw if black plays properly. But it's very hard to find such moves like rook b2, especially when you're low on time. Okay, let's continue. And after bishop c8, okay, let's talk about this line. So let's say this. Let's say I just play a random move. Let it be a rook move. So bishop c8. This. King b6, still f6. Maybe you wanted to play d7, king e7, and then king b6. Well, then I can start capturing rook pawns. So rook a4. I cannot take the g4 because of d, I take a check, and then bishop g4, but a4 at least. And with my king, I stop it. If this move, then either rook d4 or rook c4 and advance this pawn. So it works. Okay, let's continue with our next example. The game between Mark Taimanov and Yuri Averbakh. So it's actually for black. Let's flip the board. What do you think about the white's attack on the king side? Well, usually attacking the king isn't a good plan in the endgame because without queens on the board, the chance to succeed with this attack is much lower. But this time, all white pieces are targeting the king side. Maybe they can succeed with this attack. At least they can try to capture there, to advance the pawn to h6 and pressure the g pawn. Maybe not checkmate, but create a pass pawn. So the attack looks strong. What would you suggest for black in this position? Maybe black should do the attack on the queen side instead. a5. Okay, okay, let me try. a5, g takes h5. What then? b5. H6. So it seems that b4 is too late. You have to play h6, g6, but then h5. And, well, what then? You lose this pawn. Well, you can start b5 right away, and after g takes h5, you already play b4, but then still h6, g6, h5, c3 now, well, just bishop e1. This pawn is still a problem. Bishop e8 defending it. Yeah, but this is a passive defense. So let's say what, h7? h7? No, not h7. Bishop h5 maybe. Or knight f6. Okay, let it be h7. So king h8. And knight d6 maybe to activate the bishop through the dark squares. So for example, bishop d6, pawn takes d6, and then something like that is coming. Should be fine. So that's why it's very slow. What do you think? There is knight f4. Well, there is knight f4 in this position, you mean? But okay. So maybe bishop h4. Then once you move, I can take on g6. So can you suggest anything that allows you to avoid these problems on the king side? Something much faster than these. c3. Thanks, Erosh. Yes, we can try c3 right away. How does it work? Well, this time it's much faster. Now, yes, if bishop goes there, then we can take and knight f4, and we still have time to defend our position. Well, what if they take on c3, which they definitely have to do? So, for example, if they take with a knight, it's a disaster because then this bishop is hanging, and the bishop takes bishop, there is intermediate check, and black wins material. If, for example, bishop takes on c3, it's basically the same. We can play like that. So the knight is pinned. That's why they have to capture with the b pawn, and then rook a c8. And now after they take, bishop f4, rook f4, and just rook c3. If now they play like that, g6. h7, king takes h7 is a blunder because of h5, and they attack through the h file. So king h8, and after h5, just rook c4, threatening to take there, but also to deliver checkmate with bishop a3. Let's say this, and then you just reroute your bishop to e3. So, but well, there were also some other ways to how to defend the position. At the very least, it was possible to take there. Okay, fine. So b takes c3 is a must. What do you think? How to continue here? We sacrifice the pawn, but how do we take advantage of this sacrifice? So it delays the white's attack. Yes, but for one move only. Or we can create some problems and force white to focus on the queenside plate instead. Uh, so knight b6 c4. Yeah, knight b6 c4. The bishop is pinned. So how do they have to play? If let's say they capture immediately, then knight c4, and you are threatening to take there and there. So for example, h6 already fails. You just what, take on d2, or play bishop a3, and then take on d2. So rook g7 isn't a big issue even, because we win a piece. How do we win a piece? With bishop a3. Then if the king goes there, we can take on d2 without any issues. If the king goes there, then this knight is pinned and we take on f3, and then we can even capture a rook. So knight b6 was the key move. Rook h2 was played, could be played. This is the best move. Knight c4 anyway, with multiple threats. So basically, same bishop a3. If king goes to b1, it's simple. Exchange on a4 to capture on d2. If, let's say, the king goes to d1 to keep protecting this, bishop f4, bishop takes bishop. And what would you suggest in this position? Knight e3, but what's the purpose? Knight e3, king e2, and your knight is hanging. Bishop c5, that's right. So you can play bishop c5. How does it work? Well, it's a tempo gaining move. So they have to move their rook to g3 or to g5. Even if they play rook g3, then bishop a3, and they experience issues with this bishop. So this is a must, but you take, and if they take, you take there. So rook g5, for example, but still bishop a3. Now it's knight d2. White has some compensation, so, but, well, your king escapes, and at the very least, you can sacrifice one of your pieces for the h pawn. This is how black should play, knight b6, but they made a mistake. They played bishop a3. That was inaccuracy. And after that, the game ended in a draw. So bishop c1, exchanging this dangerous bishop. Also, this bishop was hanging because we were threatening to capture on e4, liquidating the defender, and then capturing on d2. So bishop c1, king c1, knight goes to d5. This is under attack. G takes h5. And well, here the simplest way to not to avoid any problems is to take on c3. So if they take, then bishop f3. If they don't take, then we're threatening to take on e4, so they have to take. Bishop takes, rook h3, and bishop h5. So white doubled. Well, what would you play here? Nice idea. Yes, king f8, and if they take on g7, you can play bishop g6. This is what happened in the game. I'll show you what then happened. But g6 is possible too, actually. G6, but knight goes to e4. However, it's still fine. You can move the king to g7. They go there. So now move the king away. So let them take and let them win this pawn. Your piece's activity is enough to compensate it. So king f8. Sorry, rook takes g7, bishop g6, and now they have to sacrifice it. Otherwise, the king captures like that. And then the game ended in a draw. So check, knight goes to b5, rook d7, f5 to play for a win, but pawn takes. And finally, there was a sacrifice on d6. So black sacrificed material back and then threatened this pawn. If, let's say, rook d4 defending it, it's simply king e6 and e5 is hanging too. So it's completely equal. White loses one of his pawns and then it is a draw. But black could play for a win in case if they played knight b6 instead. So instead of bishop a3, they could play knight b6 move. And if they played knight b6, then the knight c4 would be a problem. So with this bishop, with the king that cannot hide from a check, and well, the king is bad on b1 and d1, and black could have chances to play for a win. So here a sacrifice was initiated in order to defend the position of the white's king on the king side by means of distracting enemy pieces and by means of simplification, I mean, by exchanging pieces. These pieces that can attack our king or attack pawns around our king. Fine. So, fine. We have one more example. However, before we proceed with the last example, if you would like to, if you like my webinars, if you want to support it, there is a link that you can use and donate using PayPal. It works easily. Let me show you. So you just click this button, a pop-up window appears, then you enter the amount that you want to donate, then you click this PayPal button. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You log in and send this amount to my PayPal account directly. I would appreciate any help. So the link is here. Fine. Let's continue with our last example. Aaron Nimzovich was playing with black pieces. Here, white is already a pawn up. But black has some chances to attack there, right? So either h3 or even f3 at a certain moment. There is no way to take advantage of the pin. The e8 square is under the bishop's control. Also, they have some activity there and they're threatening to take on b7 in future. Well, the back rank is weak, but how do we take advantage of it? What would you suggest for black in this position if black still wants to win the game? Rook h8. Okay, so yeah, you can play rook h8. Why not? Then they play bishop f3. And then you have to defend your position, and probably it's possible. It's unclear whether it's possible or not. So you are still under the pressure. So maybe rook a e8 to create a pin, but then let's say they just play h3. Then they can threaten on c5 and then on b7. So maybe you can play knight f6 here, but well, they double, and you remember you're still a pawn down. So if you do a mass exchange on e4, there is a guarantee that you not lose the game. Rook a e6 sacrifice. You mean in this position, rook a e8 sacrifice, like that? But then this. So it was a sacrifice, but this sacrifice was this time initiated with king h6. Maybe it's not the best move, and if you set this position and turn the engine on, it says, well, white is winning. But from a human and practical point of view, if black wants to play for a win, he should play like that and sacrifice material here. So bishop f7 and f3, that was the concept. Bishop g8, rook g8, but now the g2 is a problematic pawn. Well, doing g3, for example, doesn't work so well. Do you understand why?
Victor, in the original position, could black have played bishop e4, rook e4, knight f6, attacking the rook on e4 and the bishop on h5 at the same time? Exchange, and then now knight f6?
Yeah, but there is a check.
Then king f8, you're still attacking two pieces. Or
Yeah,
king
but it's this. And after this, you lose. So maybe you should go there with the king.
h8 or something, yeah.
But well, bishop f3 just. So you're still a pawn down and experience serious issues.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So g3, this is the position that we are talking about. What do you think in this position? How black should play? Well, it was very important to push the f pawn, not the h pawn. So f3 was a very helpful move. How does this move help? So just rook e8. This is how it helps. This time there is no rook be2 because of the pawn. Well, what they should continue with. This probably, then you can play knight f6, well, even knight f8, and then you can capture on e4. Because they just have no ideas of how to defend it. Check, fine, not a big issue. So g3 fails. Well, the best move is actually knight c5 here. Why? Knight takes, pawn takes, rook g2, king takes, and this knight was exchanged. It was actually a dangerous knight. So the king goes there, not there because of bishop d3. King goes there, and you cannot take the pawn, of course. So there is a rook, but h3. And what's the plan? What do you think? How black? I mean, yeah, how black in such a position do not allow white to win? Actually, no, I have a different question. What do you think if white has any chances here to play for a win? So, for example, rook b7, what do you think about this move? Now, rook b7, no, because of rook f2. And then this pawn is dangerous, and the bishop can potentially go to that diagonal. How? Maybe through this way. Let me see. Let's say rook a7, then maybe rook c2, then f2, bishop f4. So they have to double. You can still play this, and then you continue with, well, this move is fine. This move is fine. Yeah, let me do this move. Oh, okay, no, it's a blunder. Let me play this move then. So if rook takes, I win a rook and still threaten with checkmate. Okay, so by the first glance, white looks winning. They should keep the b rook, defending the position, and attack with the other rook, with this rook. How? So rook e8. Maybe rook e7 instead. Let's say this, rook takes, and like rook g4. So there is a back rank problem always. So yeah, white has chances, but the best way for them to uh, take advantage of these chances is just to play c6. Why c6? This ruins the pawn structure, and after that we just exchange these rooks, and this rook is enough fighting against bishop and two pawns. Why? Because if not c6, if we play this move right away, let's say they play bishop e4, take, then well, which h takes, king g1, then this and this is a kind of blockade. So that's why c6 was required. And c6 was actually an easy win here, if only white found it. But white didn't, and instead of playing knight e5, which was definitely good, they played knight d6, which by the first glance looks like a very aggressive move. You attack the bishop, but this king moves, and now bishop moves to h3. Why so? The goal is to bring the bishop to g2. So rook g1 is played. What would you suggest? Well, knight e5, definitely, and then knight comes to d3. This is how black won the game. But white could still save it if he does knight e4 and keeps his knight there. Instead, white captured it on c5, and after knight d3, lost material. So knight f2, for example, is a mistake. If you decide to play so, they take, you take that rook, and here they have knight f7, which is a check. And the problem is that you cannot move to h5 with the king, because this is checkmate. And you cannot move your king um, to h7. If you do so, it's knight g5 and the fork. So rook d2, instead of knight f2, there is, well, there is rook g1. Why? Because then you can play knight f4 and threaten checkmate into bishop g2, knight at h3. And there is nothing that works. They can only sacrifice material. For example, knight e2. If they go there, you do this. That's why they have to take. And then they lost the game. So let me see if there was a better way to play. No, it doesn't seem so. Knight f7, king goes there, knight e5, knight e2. And this is was it was just a winning. Bishop d3, but it doesn't work. I mean, knight d3 stops the pawn, but we can use our bishop and bring our king to the enemy territory. Instead of doing this move, black even played better. They wanted to capture the pawn and also threaten the other one. So a3, bishop c4, knight moves, and now the king's invasion decides the game. b5, f4, a5. So another critical moment of the game. Black is completely winning, but knight f3 was played. What do you think? How exactly here black should play for a win? It's definitely about passed pawns. I'm sure everyone understands it, but how to get these passed pawns promoted? So Erosh thinks b4. Erosh, can you please specify whether you play b4 because you want to do this exchange and keep pushing your b pawn? Is it right? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else suggests anything different from b4 with the idea to advance the b pawn? Okay, a4. And actually, this is where I agree with Dan. Why a4? Well, b4 is not a mistake itself. It still is a winning move, but it's a winning move in case if you take with the king and keep the a pawn as a passed pawn. If you do with the b pawn, it's easy to stop it. So knight d2 simply. b3, he already takes it, and then takes on e2. But it's not so easy for the knight to stop the a pawn, so a4. F5, b4, take. King takes, f6, fine, we have the bishop that can stop it, but a3. So knight d4 is the last attempt, but, well, they threaten to play knight c2 and win a pawn. That's why we have to advance it. They still play this move. However, after king c3, it seems it's game over. Because if the knight moves, we promote. If the knight goes to the corner, we come and take it. So, for example, advancing these pawns is too slow. You can play bishop f7 if you want, but I think the best way is just to capture there, then retreat, and then promote. So these pawns are too far. Even if they were not, it was possible to stop them with a bishop here, for example. Instead of taking this knight with our bishop, we could just play bishop to f7. Okay, fine. So, well, what we were talking about today, that was the last game, and let me try to make a conclusion. So, first of all, you should sacrifice a pawn or some other material in the endgame when you see that you want to play and you have chances to play for a win, but you don't see how. And if it improves your pieces, if especially the king, if it allows you to exchange enemy bad pieces, if it just ruins the pawn structure and then you can take advantage of it, do it. However, don't sacrifice if you see that there is also an easy way to win without sacrifice, because maybe you just simply don't see it. You can sacrifice later if, for example, the first method of winning that you saw didn't work for some reason. You can also sacrifice material, but not much, in case if you see that it's a way to distract enemy and to distract your opponent and his pieces from his active actions, like attack on your king or attack on your weak pawns. Fine. So we are done for today. I'm sure you found this webinar helpful. So I suggest to meet next Sunday. Next Sunday I'll be already at home. Actually, I will be at home on Tuesday. So And on Wednesday, I will announce a new webinar. If you have any suggestions, any topics that you want me to cover, you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. Let me type it here in the chat. Also, if you're looking for individual or group classes, also let me know. You can message me to the same email, tricksofchess@gmail.com. Well, do you have any specific questions that you would like me to answer? And soon I'm going to announce a masterclass that we are going to do for the 8 weeks, once a week on Fridays, I think. It will be devoted to the attacking and defensive skills. So how to attack and defense, which is actually a vital part of a chess game for every chess player. Okay, if no questions, let's finish for today. Okay, perfect. So see you next